by one, but I got to like some of them. Some of them I didn't like at all, and I don't like them now. And I'd rely on them, and I'd rely on other people. So all of a sudden, people would come in, I'd like to recommend so-and-so to be Secretary of State, and I'd have 3-4 people recommend. One thing I can tell you, Joe, everybody wants the position.
Of course.
No, but sometimes I'll hear, a lot of people don't want to work with Trump because Trump is tough to work with, etc. Let me tell you, everybody wants to be any one of these positions. They die for it.
Of course.
Now, they don't want to be known. I mean, there's a particular guy in New York, primarily, very big, very successful, very strong, very political, although he's not a politician. He'd give anything to be Secretary of State, but if they ask him, no, I don't think I would do it. But in the meantime, begging for it, okay, begging.
I believe you.
Everybody wants it.
But what I wanted to get
by the
to...
way, no matter what you do, but it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician because a politician's been basically vetted for years.
Right.
You pick a business guy, and they've never been vetted at all, and they're, the head of a big company or something, but they've never been vetted. You know nothing about his personal life. You know nothing about where he's been. When you put him in, it's a little bit dangerous because all of a sudden they get checked up and you hear things that you're saying, wow, this is not going to work out too well. So it's very dangerous. Picking people that are outside of politics is somewhat dangerous.
So you're kind of stuck in a position we have to pick established people. And then the problem with established people is established people are already indoctrinated into the system.
And they're stiffs in many cases.
Stiffs.
They're survivors. I find that,
What do you mean by stiffs? When you say stiffs?
A stiff, they don't have nothing. They have nothing. Or they're smart and survive. One little thing. So there was a congressman years before I ran, and I was very close to him. And I needed a license on something, and he was very important in getting the license. But it was a little bit controversial, the license, this particular thing that was being licensed. But I was close to this guy and helped him and everything else. And I went to him, I said, I'd like to have your help. And he said, let me take a look at it. I said, oh, that's not too good. But I really hope you're going to help. And anyway, he tapped me along for a long period of time and ultimately didn't do it. And I said, you are a stiff. You could have done this thing so easy, etc. But it was controversial. He was in Congress for many years, like 28 years. And, there's a reason when somebody's there for 28 years, you got to be sort of smart.
Right.
You have all the scandals. And I realized he was a survivor.
And so they never do anything controversial. They never take any chances or speak their opinion that's outside of the... Yeah.
And yet I don't disrespect him for it. So I actually respected the guy more in a certain way. I said,
because he did survive.
You know what? He's been there for 28 years, and he made it through. A lot of people don't make it through.
It's a good way for non-exceptional people to survive.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is.
So you're in there. You have 10,000 appointments you have to make. So you're getting advice from people. And at one point in time, did you have a moment in time where you realized, these are bad choices? Like, some of these people I shouldn't have had in there.
Oh, yeah. I think, so the one question that you'll ask me, that I think you'll ask me, that people seem to ask, and I always come up with the same answer. The one mistake, because I had a lot of success, great economy, great everything. Everything was great. The military, we rebuilt it, biggest tax cuts in history, all this stuff. We had a great presidency. 3 Supreme Court justices. Most people get none. You pick them young.
What have you done?
This way they're there for 50 years, right? So, even if a president is there for 8 years, oftentimes they never have a chance. I had 3. It was sort of the luck of the draw. But I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
neocons?
Yeah, neocons, or bad people, or disloyal people, or
people that were just
people
bad.
That were into the
people got bad advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're reading about him a little bit today. A guy like Kelly, who was a bully, but a weak person. You know more about bullies than anybody probably around because you deal in a certain sport where the bullies are exposed very quickly.
Yeah.
But he's bad. Bolton was an idiot, but he was great for me because I'd go in with a guy like a John Bolton. John Bolton. A friend of mine called called me up. I was picking Bolton, and he's a very smart guy. His name is Phil Ruffin. He's a very rich guy from Las Vegas. He's a great card player. He doesn't play cards, but he's a great player. You know, he's just a natural. Got poker sense, right? You know, good old poker sense. And Phil Ruffin is a very, very wise kind of a guy, and one of the richest people around, and has had great success and understands people. So it was in that I was picking Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now, he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses.
We can now make our way back.
He said, "He's a bad guy. He's just, it always works out bad with that guy." I said, "Oh, man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. You know, he's here." And he was right, but he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job. And every time I had to deal with a country, when they saw this whack job standing behind me, they said, "Oh, man, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. So I always got more publicity than other people. And it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me why.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe.
You said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN, in all their brilliance, by highlighting your wild shit, made you much more popular.
Yeah.
And they boosted you in the polls because people were tired of someone talking in this bullshit, pre-prepared politician lingo. And even if they didn't agree with you, they at least knew whoever that guy is, that's him. That's really him. Yeah. When you see certain people talk, certain people in the public eye, you don't know who they are. You have no idea who they are. It's very difficult to know. And you see them in conversations. They have these pre-planned answers. They say everything. It's very rehearsed. You never get to the meat of it. One of the beautiful things about you is that you free ball. Like, you get out and you do these huge events, and you're just talking, and you're making. We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand up. It's funny stuff. But it's like and you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, "You'd be in jail." Like it's great timing.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like no one had done that. And I think...
You know, it's funny. You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business, first of all. It's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
It's the most, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts. And they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people. They would try to ramp up gun laws. They would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks if Biden got shot in the ear, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential presidents. If you take a look at what's happened, look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstance. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target. And it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically... So I saw a thing, I don't know if it's right, but 0.1% for a race car driver. It's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
0.1% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me,
you're talking death.
These guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 1/10 of 1% die. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, 1/10 of 1% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Really, I mean, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with the president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts
and attempts too,
yeah.
and attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. It's
well,
very
it probably
interesting.
would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. I mean, even today, like Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert E. Lee.
They love to take things out of context and distort things. But
they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
they do that too.
But it's interesting when you mentioned I was very popular, and all those people loved me. I mean, some of these women, they're so stupid. And Joy, she would every time she'd see me, I'd be in the theater or something, and she'd, you have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go.
She loved you.
To love me.
That episode where
the way,
people should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But if you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only
but Whoopi
9 years ago.
Whoopi loved
you. Gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her. But she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know, anyway, she was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits in the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He's inconsequential. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes on The View. She started hitting the hell out of me. Because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they called and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative, that's okay. There are guys on like CNN, they won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I mean, I respect what he did. He could have gone, negative. I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well,
it's just so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though, and I've seen the worst. I mean, I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst. Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad. And 60 Minutes took the answer out. They took the whole, and they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better. They took it wasn't editing. It was fraud. This was not editing. Editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change around, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But it's sort of bad. I'd give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, I like to give the weave. I like to.
Yeah, you like to weave things in.
Yeah, but when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this. Just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up.
Home.
No, it comes back home.
Yeah.
For the right people, for the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, and they end up in the wilderness, right? but they can take my answer, and you know what? They may take a little piece of it out or something, and they use the term, "Yes, we wanted to save time." Well, it's not. But I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history, what happened to CBS. So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not an entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. And they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that?
We can show it if you want people to see it. Can we show it? No?
Sure.
We get in trouble? We'll get copyright strike? Okay.
Listen,
anyone can find it. But it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out there.
Some kid put the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that. And then all of a sudden they said, we got a problem.
Exactly. And then
they got caught by mistake.
Well,
But don't you think that's a bit, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud. And it's 60 Minutes, it's their news division, so
it's a big deal.
They give those licenses out, Joe, for free. They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. Cable's different. But, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them out free, but you have to be honest and all. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was like, I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. It's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them,
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm sure what they want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And one of the most egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in war zones. Yeah. There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, well, what the fuck are we then? Because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody. So if someone says maybe she thought there was no, which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
Well, Joe, when I said crime is soaring, he said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy, but I've had that.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud. Because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But when the real numbers came out, I turned out to be right. But I haven't.
You turned out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up. Because people have lost, look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit, the morale of these poor cops, it's fucking horrible. Yeah. It's the dumbest idea of all time. But what they've done is they've made these cops feel terrible. They're like good cops. I think cops are just like everybody else. Most of them are great. It's like everybody else. But if you run into one carpenter and he does a shitty job in your house, you say, carpenters fucking suck. But they don't suck. Most of them are great, and that's the key thing with cops. But the point is, like, they did all of these things in this very foolish way, and these cops are suffering the consequences of it. And so subsequently, what happens is a lot of crime is unreported. A lot of crime, like, you call the cops, they're too busy, they can't even get to you. Oh, your house got broken into? Sorry. It doesn't even make a report. There's a lot of people that they just give up.
It's so sad what's happened, and I'll tell you what, I go to police funerals, and we went to one in Long Island. I visited the family in Long Island, a very big deal. It's so dangerous. People don't realize. The car, dark windows, pull over. He's a gentleman. Please pull over. Door opens, guy comes out firing. Even if they were allowed to pull out their gun, which they're not, they can't, pull
do
out
it in time. Yeah.
They still wouldn't have time.
It's every cop's worst nightmare.
They opened a door, and he was killed, and his partner was hurt. He was killed.
And a sandhole.
And you don't even have an eighth of a second to think. And it is such a dangerous job. That in particular, think of it. You go up to a car, you don't know who's sitting there with a gun. And if they have a gun, you really don't have a chance. You're not allowed to have your gun out, by the way. They have very strict rules. So, number one, but even if you could have your gun out, the door opens and bullets start firing out, and especially where they have the dark windows, where they have the darkened windows. It is such a dangerous profession, and it's very hard to get cops now because they're not given any backup. And you're right. They have like an eighth of a second to make a decision that's going to change their life. If they make the wrong decision, they're going to end up on the front page of every newspaper in the country. And they're going to lose their house and their pension and their job, and their wife is going to be gone, and everything's going to be gone.
And here's another thing that people don't talk about. How many of them have PTSD? Probably most of them.
Yeah,
these guys are seeing people shot all the time.
Yep.
You know, I've talked to a ton of cops about it, and a lot of cops commit suicide. A lot of cops are deeply depressed.
But we have to give them back their dignity. We can't. We just have to give it back. You said it so good. You never hear anybody say that. You're never going to have it perfect. You're going to have a bad apple.
In everything, in every profession.
But every time there's a bad apple, that gets massive publicity, and it taints everybody else.
But it's also this very irresponsible thing where people say, defund the police, get rid of the police. You know, even Kamala Harris was a part of that. That it's a very stupid way to look at it. What you should do is fund the police. You should have better training. You should have cops that feel more appreciated. You should have something that helps mitigate this PTSD that all of them suffer through.
Right. She was a big part of defund the police. That was a big thing for her, defund the police, always defund the police.
It's a political idea,
but
right?
Anybody with that political thought, I don't think should be running for president, and I think people are getting wise to it. You know, we're doing pretty well now. I don't know. Maybe in a week from now, say, sorry about that, I was wrong, but we're leading everything. And I think we're going to have a very good election. But I tell people, because people are starting to get to know her. But she was defund the police. She was all these transgender operations. You know, if you wanted a sex change and you were in detention and you demanded a sex change, they would give you a sex change.
Well, the wildest one is this idea of giving free sex change to illegal immigrants.
That's right. In detention.
That is the wildest thing.
But
is that the biggest problem you have?
Yeah.
You just walked here from Guatemala. You need to become a girl.
But she was in favor of it.
Yes.
So think of it. She changed. She changed 15 policies. In fact, I'm going to send her a MAGA cap.
She stole your idea about no tax for tips.
I came up with this idea that honestly nobody ever heard of. And now it took her 2 months, but you know what? All of a sudden,
it caught fire.
And she just put it into a little speech.
Yeah.
Well,
it became popular.
I think we still have that issue. I think that issue is a good one for us. But no, we have a lot of good issues. You know, we had the other day. Think of how simple some of these things are. We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge car auto plant being built by China in Mexico, make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there when I'm president, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. It would have more than all of Michigan makes. So that's how big. You know, this is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah, I read this.
I did a big favor for our country by doing that. And I'm not even there yet. To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure, but why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, but he was right. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't. You know, believe me, they control our politicians. If you look at the kind of numbers that these guys make then and now, but we had a commission meeting in the, I think it was 1887. Think of this problem. We were so rich. We had so much money. We didn't know what to do. So they set up a blue ribbon commission on tariffs. And the sole purpose is what to do with all the money we had. We were so rich because we were taxing other people for coming in and taking our jobs. And China does it. That's what China did. If you want to open a factory and sell cars, if you build a factory here or have a factory, they don't take our cars. They wouldn't take our cars. But if you build a plant in China, you can do that. Elon did that. By the way, Elon is great. That guy is such a great guy. I think you're a fan of Elon. He is from a different planet. He's the greatest guy. That rocket coming in.
Yeah.
I told the story once or twice, so you may have heard it, because these speeches have been good. Did you see the one last night?
Yeah.
29,000 people. That was it.
Yeah.
That boy's smile is creepy as fuck.
We are rocking and rolling. But Elon, and I'm talking to this very important guy. I said, wait a minute, I'm looking at something. The television's unmuted, right? And I see this rocket. It's all brown from the heat. You know, it comes from 10,000 degrees pouring down at thousands of miles an hour. And I see this thing. You know, it's like a 20-story building.
And it catches
And I
it.
say to this guy's an important guy, wait a minute. Let me just put you down. Hold it. I got to see this.
More of those
And I
bells.
see this, and it's going to crash. I said, it's going to crash into the gantry. They call it a gantry. I said, oh, man, that's going to be a disaster because it's starting to get very close. And then all of a sudden you see the flames and about a roar, and then boom, and then you see the two arms grab it.
Crazy.
And I forgot the guy. I had him on the phone. I forgot. No, I said, the hell with it. No, I called Elon. I said, was that you? He said, that was me. And I said, who else can do that? He said, nobody. Russia can't do it. The United States. Nobody can do it. You know, I set up Space Force. That was me. And that's the first time in 82 years that we opened another branch since the Air Force. And that's going to be one of our most important things. But think of what Elon does. And he did one other thing that I never heard of it.
Do
It's
you see any other way?
Starlink.
No.
I went down to North Carolina, Georgia, the different down, and they had no communication. The poles were all knocked down, everything. And one of the guys in North Carolina said, could you do me a favor? Do you know Elon Musk? Yes. He endorsed me. By the way, he gave me the nicest endorsement, too. The tough. He said, the country's going to fail. You should do the same thing, Joe, because you cannot be voting for Kamala. Kamala, you're not a Kamala person. I know you. I've watched you. I know him better than he does. You know what? Without speaking to you, I think I know you maybe almost as well as your wife. I have watched you for so many years. You're not a Kamala person. You're a Khabib person, but you're not a Kamala person. No, nobody's going to know who Khabib is, but
They know.
he was not bad, right? That
Oh,
guy.
he was phenomenal.
But that's your kind of
Your
person.
weave is getting wide. We're getting wide with
my
this
weave,
weave.
but isn't it
I want
much
to bring it
better?
back to tariffs.
But wait one second before we finish with tariffs. So they said, could you get him? We need Starlink. And I call Elon. He got it for him so fast, saved so many lives. And I said, how was it? They said, better than the wires. You know, they couldn't put them in. They were all gone. So
I used it recently in Utah in the mountains.
Did you find it good?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's the size of an iPad. You just set it down on the ground. You get high-speed internet. It's incredible.
We're spending, just to show you,
There's light.
we're spending
Do.
$1 trillion to get cables all over the country, right? Up to upstate areas where you have like 2 farms and they're spending millions of dollars to have
Well,
a
talk about the
Elon can do it
$42
for nothing.
billion that was wasted on this internet access program. They didn't get anybody access to internet.
They haven't hooked up one person.
Not one person. They spent $42 billion. They could have gotten Starlinks to everybody with that kind of money.
For almost nothing.
Yeah.
For a monthly charge.
And it would have been incredible. And it's
And he wanted
high-speed
to do
internet
it.
everywhere you want to go.
And he wanted to do that.
And he wanted to do it.
How about this? They built the charger stations, right? In the Midwest. They built 8 of them. They cost $9 billion. That's like a gas pump, right? They built 9 gas pumps, except electricity comes out. They spent $9 billion. 3 of them don't work. The whole thing. There's so much waste. I could sit here and tell you about things that there's so much waste, abuse,
It would
and
help me if you
fraud.
would
Oh,
hold the light up
there's,
so I could see
yeah,
what I'm shooting.
I'm sure.
Use your
I mean, I
ears.
think everybody's aware of that.
Let's get back to tariffs.
When you're talking about, one of the criticisms of your administration was with tax cuts and with tariffs, you increased the deficit. So what was the strategy behind that? And did you think it was going to increase the deficit by a substantial amount?
Okay, we were ready to rock. It was all, I had a bad system. We had a horrible tax policy. I made it great with a much lower tax rate. So I took it from almost 40% down to 21%. Now I'm bringing it from 21 down to 15, but only if you make your product in the United States, which is great. People call me, they said, what a great idea. Nobody ever heard of that before. I don't care if they make the product in Japan. Why should I give them? So it's at 21. That, at 21, in the first year, we took in much more revenue than we did at almost 40. Think of that. It inspired. Now, we had other things, too. We were able to get people to bring back their money. You couldn't bring back your money. If you had money in Europe, like Apple. Apple had many billions of dollars outside. They couldn't bring it. There was no way to bring it back in. The bureaucracy, the documents, the whole thing, and also the tax was too high. You know, they wanted like half of it or something. Nobody's going to do that. So they leave their money in Japan and they spend their money there. That was part of what I did. The money came pouring back in. Apple took in hundreds of billions of dollars. They brought it back from overseas. They brought it in.
So how does the deficit increase because of that?
So what happened is this: we were ready to rock and roll, and then we had the COVID thing, and we had to focus on that. And if we didn't give some businesses a hand, they would have all. You would have had a depression like in 1929. But we were ready to start. We would have very shortly been paying off debt. You know, we have $35 trillion in debt. And I'll never forget it. It was talking about from, the standpoint of being in office. I'm in the Oval Office, and I have John McLaughlin and Fabrizio. They're two very good pollsters, probably, I don't know, I would say the two best, who knows, but very good pollsters. And we're starting to think about running for a second term. And we have the greatest economy in history. Never has there been an economy.
And you attribute that to lowering taxes?
Yeah, a lot of errors. Two things. And also I cut regulations more than anybody else. And I asked many of the businessmen, from the big companies, the guys running the big companies, I'd say, so if you had your choice, you've had it now for a long time, what's more important to you, the tax cuts, you paid less tax, or the regulation cuts? Every one of them said the regulation cuts meant more. Who would think that, right? Because you don't equate it to dollars, but it actually is more dollars. We had it going, and then we just had to focus on something else. But they were sitting there, these two pollsters were sitting there, and they said, sir, if George Washington came back and Abraham Lincoln was his VP, as opposed to Waltz, how bad is he, by the way? But if Abraham Lincoln was his VP, they couldn't beat you. And I'll never forget it. The following day, they said, something's happening in China, sir. Could we meet? I said, what's happening? People are dying. And it was all around the Wuhan lab, by the way. There are pictures with little lines, their body bags, all around the Wuhan lab. And I always said that from the beginning, Joe, was, they tried to say, first they said it was France, and they blamed everybody.
Right.
But then they say it was bats from a cave 2,000 miles away. So we got hit with that, and despite that, we had the best economy. And when I gave it over, the stock market was higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, nobody could even believe it. But we saved it, and we were helping businesses. They were dying. They were
So
dying.
it's your belief that if you had a second term, given the policies in place, the way the economy was booming, that you would have been able to pay off a lot of the debt. And
If
that was the strategy.
If we didn't have COVID, we would have been paying off debt, and we would have had, and don't forget, by growth, the word growth is actually more important in a way, because you could have the same debt, but if you doubled your growth, all of a sudden you're under-levered. But still, we should pay off debt. If you viewed this $35 trillion right now, it's a lot. But if you look at the asset value, if you looked at it purely as an asset value, we have oil underground, we have water, we have mountains, the assets are so enormous. But regardless of that, we've got $35 trillion in debt, we should pay it off. And we would have started paying off debt and probably even given further tax reductions. I want to get it down to 15%. We're going to do more business. But when you get hit with a COVID, everything stops, and you have to keep these businesses alive. The businesses were dying. I mean, they were just dying. This whole place, this country was going to die.
Are there influences outside of environmental that keep people from wanting to drill for oil and frack and do those sort of things outside of the environmental concerns, which are legitimate, of course?
No,
but are there other influences that maybe over accentuate or over exaggerate these environmental effects? Are people being influenced in a way where they're trying to keep us from producing American oil?
Yeah. So the environmental is the biggest tool for stopping growth, the biggest tool. The other is regulation. And if you speak to Elon, he said the regulation now to send a rocket up to anywhere, even if you do everything, it's becoming impossible. But they use environmental in order to get people not to do anything. And sometimes I say, you know, I look at some of I know the environmental stuff better because I had to build buildings in New York. I had to do environmental impact studies. And I would see some of these guys that I'd hire for a lot of money, environmentalists, that would get you through the process. And they'd be up in Albany, that's the capital of New York, and they're up there trying to make it tougher for guys like me that were builders because they'd get paid more money. In other words, I had one guy, highly recommended, I was good at getting permits. I was one of the kings of, I was always very good. But the environmental stuff was always horrible. They could slow a project down 10 years, 15 years. I had a project in Louisiana, built big LNG plant. It was for 14 years. It was going to cost $18 billion, one of the biggest, like the Empire State Building, laying down on its side times 4. Massive on the coast, on the Gulf Coast. And they said, sir, they're going to give it up. I said, they shouldn't give it up. What's the problem? They can't get their environmental. They had environmental permits that would fill this whole room up to the ceiling. And they said there was one mistake on one little line. They wanted to do it all over again. It's not going to happen. And I got them their permit instantly. And they built the plant. It's massive.
So when you're saying that, there's people that are making money by making it difficult.
Yeah.
Are you talking about lawyers?
No, I'm talking about environmental consultants and lawyers.
Environmental consultants profit off of dragging out the process.
Absolutely.
And how do they
the
profit?
Process worse.
How do they profit?
And I'd probably do the same thing if I were them, to be honest with you.
I
want to be honest with you.
How do they do that? How do they make it?
Let's say New York, they go to Albany.
Okay.
And they convince people that if you have a certain type of plant on the ground that's this big and in theory valueless, that it's a rare plant and you cannot ever even touch it. You can't go near it. You can't put a building on it. You can't do anything. Or there's a little puddle and they call it a lake. And you have to go by the standards of a lake. I said, no, that's a puddle. Oh, you have no idea. Guys are filling little puddles. You have no idea what they do. And they use it as a way to stop you.
They use it as a way to stop you and also as a way to generate money. I'm curious how are they generating money that way, though?
Well, they get fees.
They get fees.
Massive fees.
And
you pay these guys.
People rely on them as experts because they're the people that they go to when they have to run these studies in the first place.
But some of them are just bad guys, and they're trying to make it more and more difficult.
And they have a lot of power.
I think they maybe had more. They didn't have as much with me because I would get through them, and I understood it. Look, I've done so many they call it environmental impact study. I did so much to build a building. To build a building in New York is very tough. You got to deal with, think of it, financing, unions, all the municipal stuff, environmental. Of all of it, to me, the toughest thing was the environmental, because they could stop you cold with the environmental impact study stuff. And you hire a so-called expert. They say, sir, he's the one guy, he can get you through the morass. It's a morass. It's horrible. They use it as a weapon. They use it all over the country.
Right, but there are legitimate concerns about environmental impact, correct? Like, look about the BP oil spill. There's a lot of things that do happen that are environmentally devastating. And you want to mitigate that as much as possible.
You do. Look, I had, during our 4 years, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water. I view it differently. I say air and water. Remember this, it costs much more to do things environmentally clean. China doesn't do anything.
Right.
When Kerry goes to see President Xi of China, which he probably doesn't even get to see him, But they look at him, oh, yes, yes, we will do. Oh, yes, yes, we're going to do that. No more coal, no more coal. And then they approve 58 coal plants for the next, they build a coal plant a week. Okay.
They build a lot of coal plants.
But let me just tell you, though, so here we are cleaning and scrubbing everything, and everything's got to, the air's got to be pure. But in 3.8 days, that stuff floating over China is right over the top of us.
Right.
Same thing with the oceans. They dump their garbage into the Pacific Ocean. If you take a little cork and put it there, in about a week and a half, it'll be in front of Los Angeles. We're picking up their garbage. So nobody ever talks about that. But in a way, the bigger one is even the air. It's the currents. It's an amazing thing. It's been flowing that way for 1,000,000 years, or long before.
We share air with the whole world. Yeah.
No. If
we get the Sahara dust clouds over here.
Absolutely.
We get dust clouds in Austin from the Sahara Desert.
But we get the China, they call it the China curse. We get the China curse. They're bad, and their air is dirty. When I went there, I had a great relationship with President Xi. We got along very well. And they treated me better than anybody's ever been treated. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, a number of them. But they laid it out. And I said, this air is good. Do you know they closed every factory 1 week before I got there from within 200 miles?
That's like what Gavin Newsom did when Xi Jinping came to San Francisco.
He cleaned it up.
He cleaned it up. He got rid of all the homeless people.
Isn't that terrible in a way to think, he cleaned it up and then it became a pigsty?
Well, the dumbest thing is he said when your friends come by, when you have visitors, you clean up your house. Like, how about just keep your fucking house clean?
Can you imagine?
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say ever as a governor, as to excuse to why you finally cleaned up your homeless problem.
And the day he left,
right back to it.
It went right back.
Yeah.
But in a way, that was a bad thing that he did, because he showed what a disgrace that was. What a disgrace.
Well, this is the thing that shows you how foolish a lot of these people that are running these cities think. A lot of these people that are running these states think. It's foolish. You're insulting the intelligence of the people that live in that city that are impacted by these people just camping and needles and human feces. There's an app that you can buy. There's an app that you can get, that will show you where the human feces has been documented in San Francisco. It's a poo app. And it's just everywhere. It's just bum crap everywhere.
But let me give you one that you may not know.
Okay.
Which I think you know everything, actually. As a student of yours. but water. In Los Angeles, you can't get proper amounts of water.
Right.
And it's unbelievably expensive. And you might have a house in Beverly Hills, and they're actually thinking about rationing water. Can you believe it?
I can believe it.
I was in the farm court country with some of the congressmen. We're driving up the highway, and I say, how come all this land is so barren? It's farmland, and it looked terrible. It was just brown and bad. I said, but there's always that little corner that's so green and beautiful. They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why don't you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north. More water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. You got to see this. We're driving up, and I had never seen it before. It's like Iowa. It's the most fertile land. Iowa's blessed with great land. Idaho for a potato, right?
Yeah.
But they're just, by the way, some land is good for a potato, some land is good for corn. It's the craziest thing. I love the farmers. They're great. They're the greatest. And by the way, they're getting killed right now.
They are.
They're getting killed because of this stupid administration. But so I see this, and I said, you got to be kidding. I said, you mean you have water? And I looked at it. It's like a valve in your sink, except it's massive. The thing's 5 times taller than your ceiling.
Did you know the center of California was a giant lake?
They have so much water.
You ever see what it looks like before they rerouted it? The center of California, what was it, 200 years ago? How long ago did they do that, Jamie? The center of California had a fucking enormous lake in the middle of California.
They dumped it into the Pacific.
Who knows what they did? But whatever foolishness that they did led to the situation that they're in now.
Think of those dry forests that burned down all the... the head of Austria said...
There it is. Tulare Lake, or Tachi Lake. It's a freshwater lake in the southern San Joaquin Valley, United States. Historically, Tulare Lake was one of the largest freshwater lakes west of the Mississippi. Show a photo of what it looked like back then.
That's a great system.
So that's what it looked like. Look at that image. Now, go to the one on the third from the right. Yeah. That was an enormous lake in the middle of California. Imagine that.
That'd be much more valuable property.
How crazy is that? But how crazy is that's what it used to look like, and human beings screwed that up.
They let it go into the Pacific, and then they...
I don't know what they did. What did they do? How did it go missing?
Yeah, they drained it.
1983. Oh my God. Oh, went dry a handful of times. Well, lakes do go dry, but that's a big one.
But
It's a big one to go
you
dry.
could have all of the water you need. All of that land would have more water. The whole thing could be like that little patch.
Yeah.
Literally, I'd say I was with Devin Nunes, a congressman, and other congressmen who were growing up. I was visiting them because they asked me to go up and visit their territory, and I did. But I kept saying, look at this land, it's beautiful, but it's so dry. And I thought they were going through like a desert, like a drought. They said, no, we have water, but it gets rid. So I looked into it.
What is the fish?
And I got it done. I could have water for all of that land. Water for your forests. Your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You could have everything. Not like dangerous. Billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. When a tree falls down, after 18 months it becomes very dry. It's like, like real firewood. It's bad. A tree that's up, these are all things I learned the hard way, the easy way. But when a tree is up, it sucks water. It's wet. I went to they had a couple of horrible forest fires in California, and I said, you got a lot of trees standing. Yes, they were healthy trees, sir. I said, with this intense heat, that you could see they were charred a little bit at the bottom, but they were going to be all right because they're soaking wet because they suck up the water, right? But when they fall, they're like, it's like lighting a match.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to clean and maintain your forest. So I was with the head of Austria. He said, it's a shame. I see all those forest fires in California, and all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of, leaves that are sitting there for 5 years, and they
certainly get rid of the deadfall,
and get rid of the trees that have fallen, and that are like so many things. This country, by the way,
could you
rake
the whole forest? I don't think you could rake the whole forest.
Well,
I think you can get rid of the deadfall, but raking all the leaves.
Certainly get rid of the dead. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the real issue.
Environmentally, they don't want to do that. They don't. They said, it's got to be nature and all this stuff. But in the meantime, this is exactly right. But you could have it was the Department of Commerce that needed the approvals, but Gavin Newsom had to sign them. I got it all done. Nobody could believe it. It was all done. I said, I got it. You got so much water. All you have to do is sign. And that guy didn't want to sign.
Did he not want to sign because that would be a political victory for you?
No, he didn't. No, I don't think so. He used to say he's a great president and we got along. We did. We actually got along at that point. But I think somebody said you just can't continue to call him a great president. They do say that. But we had it all done. He didn't sign, and then we got onto other things. And I every time I go to California, I said, you have so much water. They don't know it. I'm telling you, people living in Beverly Hills, they turn off the water. Same thing with the electric. They want to go to all electric cars, but they have brownouts every weekend,
Well, right after they made the announcement that as of 2035, you're not going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine in California, like within a month, they had some announcement asking people to not charge their Teslas. Because the grid couldn't handle it. Well, how are you
I will terminate the mandate immediately. This is a mandate.
You want to tell me
something? Will be done, I would say, in my first day, maybe 2 days, because,
Let me ask you about nuclear. One of the things that when I've talked to people that have a real understanding of nuclear power, what their position is, it's probably the cleanest, safest form of electricity that we can generate. And that the fears of nuclear power are really about a few disasters. The Fukushima, 3 Mile Island. These are old systems, and they're much more capable now, and they're capable of making even better systems. But it's a difficult political issue because you think nuclear power, you think Chernobyl. That's what everybody does. They have this connection in their head, the potential
Or
disaster.
Fukushima,
Or Fukushima.
where you're not supposed to enter the land for 3,000 years or something.
It's I think it's worse than that. I think that area is like going to be radioactive for probably longer than you could imagine. But the point is they're better at it now.
Right.
And that they could do it now, and you can generate power in a way that you don't have to worry about these. One of the most ridiculous things is electric cars being powered by coal-fired plants. It's a ridiculous thing.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, that is what's happening.
what's happening.
And people want to think they're being green, but it's...
Well, you look at the way the battery is made, but here's the other thing. We don't have... Well, we do, actually. It's being held. We have certain areas where we have great raw earth material, and we're not allowed to use it because of the environment. And we have areas in California that have incredible raw earth, and they're not allowing, and I'm going to open it up. I'm going to let them use it.
But how do you do that?
China.
How do you do that and protect the environment?
Because the environment's going to be protected. You can do it. You can make a lake out of it. Okay, we'll put back a lake. I mean, something nice about lakes. You can do things magnificently.
You just have to do it carefully and responsibly.
Absolutely, you have to do it carefully. But the problem, China has all of those areas, most of those areas. And yet, when they say go electric with the cars, China's going to be the one that gives us the cars. All of those guys in Detroit are going to be out of business. You're going to make your electric cars over there. We have a thing called gasoline, and we have more oil and gas under our feet than any other nation. I had, in Alaska, there's a find. It's called Anwar. I got it approved. Reagan couldn't get it. Nobody could get it. I got it all done. It was amazing. They were getting ready to start drilling. The equivalent, they think, of Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest finds in the world. It was all set to go. And Biden comes in, one of his first orders were, we're not going to use it. It would have been so good we could have supplied all of Asia with oil and gas.
What was the negative?
And you talk about money.
Right.
The negative was politically they didn't think.
So you don't think that it's environmentally dangerous?
Taking it from way down deep in the earth, environmentally would have been fine.
So it can be done responsibly.
Absolutely. Otherwise,
the point where it protects the environment.
Well, I think windmills. Okay, so they talk about windmills.
Point.
I think windmills are really disruptive. When you talk about the environment, they killed the birds. You want to see a bird cemetery? Go under a windmill someday that hasn't been cleaned out with all the bird carcasses. It's like massive amounts of
they're
birds.
also a massive eyesore. I went to a ranch in South Texas. We had to drive past this enormous windmill farm. It's gross. It's dystopian. You're looking in the left and the right, and all you see is these big spinning machines that aren't even that effective at generating electricity.
Correct. Most expensive form of electricity is a windmill. And then they start to rust and rot.
And you have to
replace them. And then they get
them.
abandoned by the people that built them.
Well, you have to get rid of all that material, too. When you replace those blades, now you have a problem because you have to dispose. Yeah. Right, you have to dispose these enormous windmills. And how do you dispose
they say
of them?
You can't bury them. So I even question that, but I'm not going to get into it. But they say you can't bury the blades. So you have the blades, and you can't bury the blades. You can bury the blades. It's not going to matter. You can bury them. You'll find areas you can bury. But they come up, this is what I mean, they come up with this, but the environmentalist dream is windmills, everyone. You know what happens to them? After 5 years, they start to rot. After 10 years, you have to replace them. Did you ever look at certain parts of California where they have heavy windmills and they've been abandoned?
Sir.
And they're all different manufacturers and all different companies. And
I haven't seen that.
It is the ugliest thing. It looks like a graveyard almost, a graveyard of windmills.
It's pollution.
It's so bad.
It's
and in the oceans.
It's no different than leaving garbage on the ground.
How about in New Jersey, off the coast of New Jersey, they want to build. The people are going crazy not to build them. But we have them. The whales are washing up on shore.
Right.
So in 50 years, they had one whale come ashore. Now they had like 18 come in the last year.
What is happening with the whales? I've read about this.
Well, they say that the wind drives them crazy. It's a vibration because you have those, those things are 50-story buildings, some of them.
Right, and they're
50.
super sensitive to vibrations.
They have
sounds.
The wind is rushing, the things are blowing, it's a vibration, and it makes noise. You know what it is? I want to be a whale psychiatrist. It drives the whales freaking crazy. And
Yes.
something happens with them. But for whatever reason, they're getting washed up on shore, and and yet the environmentalists
Conveniently ignored by the
but the
environmental
environmentalists, they don't talk about it.
Right.
I think there's nothing uglier. I see it in Scotland. I see it all over the world. you have this beautiful valley. It's been there for,
Mind your
in
tongue,
civilization,
boy.
thousands of years, but
Until our
millions of
journey is
years.
over, one of
And
us
all of a
must
sudden, you have
remain
these
focused.
ugly windmills up.
Would your
And the
plan to be
environment-
replace that with nuclear? What would you do?
Well, nuclear is better. I mean, I think there's a little danger in nuclear, but, we had some really bad nuclear. They did one in Alabama. They did one in, I think, South Carolina.
I'm sorry.
They do them wrong. They build these massive things. Then the environmentalists get in. I don't want to go into a long story because it's too long for the show. This show is too valuable to talk about concrete. But they have hardened concrete. It's number 12 concrete. It's harder than steel. It's incredible. They put up a wall, and an inspector comes along and knows that, nope, you're a quarter of an inch. The wall might be 8 feet wide.
In the light,
You're a quarter of an
I
inch
felt
too short.
only
I'm
moments
sorry, you got to
pass.
rip down the wall. Because it's
that
got to
is
be
of some
poured
comfort to you.
contiguously, right?
That's
You're
good to
1/4
know.
of an inch. I'm sorry, rip down. You can't rip it
So,
down. This stuff you
should we
can't
go
put a
back to
hammer
Midgard?
through. You can't. It's
Face the black breath?
incredible.
Or do you think there's more to see
Concrete
in this world?
technology is unbelievable. What's happened? You think of concrete.
So you think
but
that's an example of overregulation?
yeah,
Pointless
no. Well, you have an
overregulation.
inspector that comes along and he says, take down a
So,
$25
what do you mean I see
zillion
with
wall.
the eyes of a child?
These things ended up
In
costing
war, a
$25
soldier sees
billion.
beauty only in the blood of his
And
enemy.
then one of them never
The
got
rest of
opened.
him is
But
lost.
here's the story. So
Sometimes never to
France
return.
does it. France is largely
know
nuclear.
about war,
And they build
don't you?
small, little
Wars are
compact
fought for two
plants.
things,
And if they need more, they
survival
build the same
or
thing and they hook
advantage.
it up.
Battles
and they
may
hook
be
it up
won by the
because
better
they get
soldier.
too big and
Wars
too
are won
complex
by
and
those
too
who are willing to
expensive.
sacrifice
And
everything
it is
to
very
ensure
clean.
victory.
They say it's absolutely. My uncle. I had a great uncle who was a great genius, just like other members of my family. But he was a professor at MIT for, I think, 41 years. He was the longest. When I was in the White House, the head of MIT, Princeton, and Harvard came down to meet me. And the MIT person said, I have a book on your uncle, Dr. John Trump. He was our longest-serving professor. He was a great genius, sir. Do you know how? And he knew everything about nuclear, from math to chemistry to
How
nuclear.
observant.
He knew it. And he said someday it's going to be the way to go, but the problem is it's so dangerous in terms of war. He said,
Right.
Donald, someday, this was a long time, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump.
There's an
He
abandoned
said
temple in
someday
Midgard that a fellow
you'll have a
dwarf
little
converted to his
satchel
personal
at your
storeroom.
side.
Packed
And
it with
you'll go
all
into a
sorts of
building and you'll
treasures
be
he
able to
collected
blow
during
up
his
New York
travels
City.
throughout the
I said,
realms.
Uncle John, that'll never happen. He's right.
Did he go?
He's right.
Well, that was
the
part of
power
the
is so
problem
crazy.
Fafnir was
giving
a,
nuclear
shall we
power
say,
to
aggressive
other countries,
collector of
right? Like
magic
that was the problem that happened with
The more he
India and
acquired, the more he
Pakistan. They got
desired.
nuclear power,
There's no realm
and then
too
they were
dangerous,
able to
no
weaponize
relic
it.
too
The
hazardous.
biggest problem in the
He once
world
ventured
today
deep
is
into
not global warming.
Niflheim for a
It's
whetstone
nuclear
of all
warming.
things. Huh.
And we have
I bet that was
idiots
quite the
that are
whetstone.
negotiating
Does
for
this
us.
story have a point?
We have a guy
Yes,
that doesn't
it
make
does.
it past 4 o'clock,
Ah,
and it's
it's
not
just
because
not
of
gonna have
age.
an
You know,
entry stone
they
with
ought
a
to. I
Fafnir
know so many
storeroom.
guys in their
You
late
might find
80s,
something
and they're
useful
better
in
than you.
there.
I said to one
Neat.
guy the other day, I think you're
Well,
smarter
Fidget,
than you
you're
were
very
25 years
welcome.
ago. I've known him a
Oh,
long time.
and,
He's
if you
89
find
years
that
old. He's
whetstone,
sharp.
well,
He's
sure
great.
would be nice of you to bring it to me.
Biden gives people a bad name because that's not an age. I think they say it because I'm 3 or
I'd
4
advise
years
caution
younger. I think
heading
that's
to
why
the
they say it. They say his
Last
age.
I
It's
was
not his
there,
age.
all
He's
manner
had
of
a problem.
nastiness
Two
taken
major
up
brain
residence.
surgeries.
What's
Yeah,
it
he
gonna
did.
be
He
upset if
did.
you
He
still
had-
have the
Those are not good operations.
And
No.
do you see what he
No,
did
not
today?
at all. He's dead.
He went running towards the camera and made some apology to Native
No.
Americans.
Sorry.
And
These things
that he
happen
said
when
that's
one
why he's headed out
travels
west.
from realm to
Like
realm,
he's
collecting priceless
off the
artifacts.
reservation, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
It's interesting because during the debate, I was looking over. I'm saying, this is strange. It's just sort of like strange things were happening.
Yeah.
But
Well, he couldn't keep it together, but do you think they knew he couldn't keep it together?
I think
Do you
so.
think that they wanted that? Is that why, like, historically, that debate was earlier than they've been in the past, right?
I think they wanted to get. Well, there's a lot of theories. A lot of people said, do the debate now and we'll get him out.
Right.
I think that maybe could be.
Well, that is what happened.
But
So
that's what happened.
it's
I
logical
think they
to
also
assume that
said,
that's
do
what they
the
want.
debate now and get it over with.
Right.
I don't think anybody thought he was going to get out. Really, I
It
don't
didn't
think
make any sense.
The debate got him out, but I think it's very unfair. Look, you have a bad debate. His numbers went down,
Also,
but
remember
I
the
think she's not doing very well right now, and I think she looks.
Well, I want to get to that too because it's hard to know. Like the whole poll thing is very bizarre for most people because most people don't answer polls. So they read the polls. Then
Were
like,
you
who's
ever
getting
called
polled? I've
from
never
a
been
poll?
polled.
I was
If I
never,
did, I'd hang up.
I was never called by a poll.
If I did, I wouldn't answer. I'm busy.
You know how polls are done. I'm going to get myself
Please.
in trouble, but so I really don't believe too much in him. So,
Well, 2016 taught a lot of people about the ineffective.
well, they were very
use of polls.
ineffective because
Yeah.
I thought I was doing well. I'd go to a place and I'd have 30, 40,000 people. Hillary would go, they have 500 people, and they tell me I'm going to lose. I said, why am I going to lose? I had 40,000 people. She had 200 people. But, you know, I have a theory. These pollsters, they charge you a lot of money, too. You know, they charge you $500,000 to do some stupid poll, and they interview like 251 people. I don't think they interview them in many cases. I don't want to get myself in too much
You
trouble.
think it's
'cause-
bullshit?
No, I think they sit there, they make a deal, they get $500,000, and they say, Trump's leading 51 to 49. They announce it, and everybody says, oh. Do you understand?
Yeah. So you think
I don't
it's-
think they. I think in a lot. Look, I'm a very common sense person. I think that they probably don't always poll. Some of them probably never poll. What's the difference between 49 to 51 and 47 and a half?
Well, it's also a tiny percentage of the population. I don't think it's representative of the overall population. I just don't think
I don't
it
know
is.
of one person in my whole life that ever got called by a pollster.
Exactly. That's my point. So here's my question.
But I shouldn't say that because I'm doing really well in the polls.
But I
now.
think that's
So this week I happen to believe in a verse. I only believe them if they're good. No, I like them this month. But no, I honestly believe that there's probably a lot of fraud. I had a poll, Washington Post, ABC, in the Hillary thing on Wisconsin. They had me down 17 points the day before the election. I knew it was wrong because I had a rally. I had 29,000 people at a racetrack, and it was like 0 degrees, Wisconsin. And they had me down 17 points. In other words, you had no chance. And I won. And I called up my pollster, who's a good guy, good guy. And I believe he's legitimate. And, you know, and some of them are, some of them aren't. I said, tell me, why did they have me down so much? I mean, nobody's going to believe them the next time. They said they don't care. When you're down 17 points, people are going to stay home. They're not going to vote.
Right.
Because they're going to say, I love Trump, but I'm not going to waste my time. It's cold out. I said, but why don't they make it 4 or 5? He said, at 4 or 5, they're going to go and vote. At 17, they're not going to go and vote.
So
But
it's
think of it. I was 7.
manipulative.
This is a Washington Post ABC poll.
You don't
I
have
was
to run
down
off on my
17
account.
points in Wisconsin, and I won. It's crooked stuff.
There's a lot of crooked stuff, and I wanted to talk about that too, because one of the things that people talk about with you is the denial of the results. And I think J.D. Vance did a brilliant job the other day when he was being interviewed, and they asked him, did Trump lose the 2020 election? And he turned it around and said, was there legitimate election interference in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story on social media? And was that a concerted effort?
Well, they say
to
it made
hide-
10-point difference, and I lost by one tenth of a point.
It is.
They say it was 22,000 votes, but look, it was much more than that. And I appreciate J.D. Vance saying that. And by the way, I think he was a great pick. Do you like J.D. as a
I like
pick?
him a lot. Yeah.
You're allowed to say that. As
No, I do. I like him
No,
a lot.
I think he's good.
I think he's a brilliant guy, and I think his ability to talk like a normal human being. You did my friend Theo Vaughn's podcast,
Right.
and he just did it.
How did he do
He
it?
did great. He just talks
Is that
like
why
a
you
normal
called me
human
to
being.
do this? Is that why you called me to do this?
No, we were.
Holy cow.
I was.
He was a nice
Once
guy.
they shot you, I was like, he's got to come in here. It's all about timing. It's all about the timing.
Timing's
I think
good.
timing's perfect. Do you even have a scar in your ear? You got anything on there?
I do.
What do we say? What do you got there?
So, right over here.
Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah. It healed up pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's little. It's not like some of the wrestlers, some of the UFC fighters.
No, you didn't
It's
get
a little bit.
cauliflower
No. It was sort of like a top shot. Mm-hmm. The point of the bullet was a
Boy.
little of the ass, but you see the thing's taken off a little bit, but it makes me a tougher guy. You know the fighters. The fighters love their. Bo Nickel, he's a great fighter.
Yeah, I love Bo Nickel.
How's he going to do? I think he's
He's
terrific.
great. He's a fantastic
He
fighter.
was almost like undefeated in college.
He's a fantastic wrestler and one of the best mixed martial
When
artists.
is he fighting again?
He's fighting in Madison Square Garden in November.
Oh, that's going to be after the election?
Yep.
So I'll either go as president or I'll be depressed and I won't bother going. I think they're having a fight right after.
One of the things that was fascinating also was the denial of the election results is a pretty common thing. Hillary Clinton famously denied that she called you an illegitimate president, and she said that Russia put you in place.
Even though she conceded.
Yes.
She conceded the night of the election because she was beaten.
I'll see what I
Yes,
can fix
and it
again.
was a thing that was pretty common for people, especially Democrats, to deny the elections.
I have a confession to make.
There's been many of them. The
All
Bush
those voices in my
administration,
head.
the dangling chads,
This was
all that stuff.
Well, look at these guys in Congress, all these sleazebags in Congress that are Democrats. They're still denying 2016. But now they don't so much because, they try and pin it on me. You don't hear them say
But here's my
they
point.
denied it right up until the end.
My point is,
It happens
this
again.
idea
You
of
tell me.
election fraud
Understand?
is a forbidden topic,
I promise.
and you get labeled an election denier. It's like being labeled an anti-vaxxer if you question some of the health consequences that people have had from the COVID-19 shots. Oh my God, you're an
What does it say?
anti-vaxxer.
about
If you
the
say,
eternal
and
war
what I
of war.
say publicly, and I've said
You
this a
think it'll
lot,
stop now after what
it's
we
not
did?
0%.
Unlikely.
So if you ask me, what is the amount of election fraud in this country? Is it 0%? No one thinks it's 0%. I've never met one person, not a super liberal, progressive, far left person or a right-wing conservative. Not one person thinks it's 0%. They think when you have human beings and also you have a lot of weirdness that was going on during the 2020 elections, particularly with mail-in ballots.
And you had legislatures that had to approve, and they didn't approve, and they went out and did it anyway. And you had old-fashioned ballot screwing. I mean, you had, you have people going up and dropping in phony votes. You had unsigned ballots, et cetera, et cetera.
There's certain people that
Remember, I
think
lost
that they
my-
have, and the rhetoric is also that you're Hitler, and that
that's
in order to
another-
stop Hitler, you have to do whatever it takes.
That was okay, yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, you're hearing this now. Kamala compared you to, said your love of Hitler yesterday. It's
Kamala's a very low IQ person. She's a very low IQ. I'm for taking tests, too. I think anybody that runs for president they should give them tests. And it's not an age thing. It's not based. If you look back on history, 70s and 80s, some of your greatest leaders in the world history, long-time world history, they were in their 70s and their 80s. But I think you should take cognitive tests. I think they say it's unconstitutional. But
That's ridiculous.
I think Kamala should have a test because there's something missing. There's something wrong with her.
Well, I think it's pressure. I think the pressure and the scrutiny, you've been a celebrity for a long time and you understand what this is like. But for someone who's in her late 40s, who becomes the vice president, who runs for president, becomes the vice president, and then all of a sudden the weight of the world is on your shoulders and there's all these people paying attention. A lot of people clam up.
But you either have it or you don't.
Correct.
Look, this is an interview. We've covered a lot of territory, right? And it's fine. I don't care. I want to. I think it's much more interesting. To do an interview with Anderson Cooper, a crazy softball interview. She took 2 days off and she studied all day long, and then she comes out with a result that was a real embarrassment. That was a really bad interview. She couldn't answer a question, and every question's not answered. I mean, like, what would you do your first day in office? Okay, I'll build a wall. I won't build a wall. There's 100 things you can say. Just say anything, right? There's something off with her.
Well, I also
we're dealing with the smartest people. They hate when I say, when I call President Xi, they said, he called President Xi brilliant. Well, he's a brilliant guy. He controls 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, whether you like it or not. And they go crazy.
Right, it doesn't mean he's not evil, or it doesn't mean he's not
Yeah, of course not.
dangerous.
But actually, we have evil people in our country.
Yes.
If you have a smart president, he can deal with Russia. He can deal with all of it. Russia would have never gone into Ukraine if I were president.
How would you have stopped it?
Automatic, 2 things. I told him. I said, Vladimir, you're not going in. I used to talk to him all the time. You're not going in. I can't tell you what I told him because I think it would be inappropriate. But someday he'll tell you. But he would have never gone in. But you know why else he wouldn't have gone in? Oil prices at $40 a barrel wouldn't have allowed him, wouldn't have given him the money to prosecute that war. Wouldn't have given him the money. I said it with President. I was with President Xi. I said it was almost the same conversation. With Vladimir, it was Moscow. With President Xi, it was Beijing. It was almost the exact same conversation.
Look,
I said, don't do it. He would have never
just came
done
back
it.
from another round.
The day I left, they
Hey,
flew
your brother.
28 bombers over the middle of
Not that old.
Taiwan. 28
Did you
bombers.
let that seed
And it's the
soft
apple
into
of
your
his eye,
brain?
and the same thing with Russia. It's the apple. Ukraine is the apple of his eye. I used to talk to him. I had a very good relationship with him. He wouldn't have done it. He would have never done it. But he also wouldn't have done it because of the, one of the
He locked
reasons
up
that
on a girl?
what happened is, number one, he doesn't respect Biden at
opposite.
all. Not even a little bit. And who the hell would? But he doesn't respect him. But when he saw what happened in Afghanistan, how horribly that was handled.
They're leaving a blank.
Number one, you take the soldiers out last, not first. Okay, that was their big mistake.
But you know what
And we had
really
that thing
counts?
charted out, and they weren't obeying us. They weren't.
Consistency. And I
Abdul
got
was
that
the head of
coming
the
out of all
Taliban.
of my parts.
Boom, boom. He had to do all these things. Some he didn't do. I said, nope, you're not doing. You got to do them all. This guy he immediately took he left the equipment behind. 13 soldiers did, but he
Good.
took everybody
Now
out.
when you're done
He took his
docking, they got a
soldiers out
favor to
before.
ask.
What is
The
it,
child
boss?
would know.
There's
That's where
this
Millie was so
alchemist
stupid. He
on
was such a
Been
stupid
working out
guy.
of the Velinger
Millie.
mines.
Okay,
Haven't heard from
those
him in
generals should
maybe,
have all been
I don't
fired.
know,
The
100 winters
the
or
people
so.
that were involved
Probably
with
did,
Afghanistan
but,
should have
maybe
all
he
been
can find
fired.
it.
Then they'd
He's
be writing
forfeit
books
like
about
me.
him, how
Wears
stupid
a
he was
fancy
and
green
bad he
ring.
was.
Owes
But
me a favor.
you take your soldiers out last.
If it is all
I had a
Oh,
big
I
rally
see
and I
that.
saw a child in the front
Not a
row.
something for nothing type party.
About a year and a half ago, I
Fine.
called the child
If
up.
you
I said,
find
"Do you mind if I
Dunbar,
borrow
I'll
your
make him
child?"
look you up something.
Oh yes, please. And they came
This
up.
entry stone
Kids
here
love it.
ought to
I gave
get
them
you
quick
inside
details.
those
I said, "We want to get out of this place, and we have this,
Let's
and we
get
have
you
this, and we
squared
have the
away,
equipment."
man.
I gave them a little thing. I said, "Do you take your soldiers out first or last after everything's done?" "You take them out last, sir." A child would know that. We took our soldiers out first.
What was
and we
your
left,
plan?
And we left a bag room.
Well, not only that, we
Bog
left
room.
billions of dollars worth of equipment and military vehicles that they use
best-
for parades now.
The best equipment, yet to embarrass us, the best equipment in the world.
The
We left-
Taliban parade where they've got
Something
tanks
for the
rolling down the
boy.
streets and Blackhawks
Yeah.
flying is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
We
the
left
fact that we left
the
all that
best
stuff there.
for you.
equipment in the world behind.
What would you
Brand-
have done differently?
Well, number one, we would have taken it out. Just so you understand, go back a little bit further. I had a couple of conversations with Abdul. And from the time I had those conversations, because they were shooting our soldiers, with the sniper stuff, they were shooting a lot of them. They were shooting a lot with Obama, much less with me, but they were shooting them. And I said, get this guy on the phone. The press went nuts when they heard this. I had a great conversation with him. It was a tough conversation. 18 months later, there wasn't one soldier that was ever shot at. And even Biden admitted it in a moment of stupidity because he shouldn't have admitted it. His people went nuts. He said, yeah, well, I will admit, no soldier. We didn't have a soldier killed in 18 months in Afghanistan. Not one soldier was killed because he understood
remember the way back
what
to
was
the
going to
Black
happen
Breath.
Of
if
course.
that happened. I didn't
We
have
need to
one
walk
soldier.
across the
Then
bridge
when
to
I
Venom
left, after having
going to
gotten
the Black
more
Breath
votes than any
or
sitting
exploring?
president in the history
Your
of the
choice.
country, and much more votes than he got in 2016, when I left, they started shooting our soldiers. But more importantly, what they did is they did that whole thing with, they should have left Bagram, because Bagram's this massive base. It's got tremendous.
I'm gonna take a little smoke break. This phone's about to die anyway. It's been interesting. Oh, I don't know if I want to continue on or if we want to just go ahead and call this an episode as well. Actually, yeah, I think that's what we'll do. I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it an episode on this, and I don't know, I might jump on something else real quick. I don't know what to say. I mean, this lady, Miss Harris, Mrs. Harris, I don't know if she's married or not, but my God, whenever I hear her speak, like, it's scary to me to think that she's been the vice president. There's nothing wrong with being average, but my goodness, like, an average person is the vice president. It's just okay. And So this has just been interesting because, again, like, he just comes off like a regular person. You know, I mean, obviously weird like everybody is in their own little ways, but other than that, normal. So, what would you expect a grandpa that's made, hundreds of millions of dollars to be like? I don't know. Especially from New York. Anyway. I think I'm gonna call that, I don't know, what is this, episode 6? Call it episode 6, and shit, I'll see you in a little bit. We got a Halloween party to go to tonight. I don't know maybe I'll stream a little bit from there. We'll see. But for now, y'all just be easy. Love y'all. Stay free. Stay safe. Stay armed. I hope you and the people never harm.